Hello there, Sid here, and welcome to the Drunken Ork. Now recently I've done a few videos which have been focusing on making 40k Orks out of the GW AoS Age of Sigmar fantasy range. Fantasy? Is it fantasy? Old world? No, what? The Orks without guns. Is that even a thing? Orks, in fact, not even Orks, Orks TM. So I've done a Cyborg from the Gore Grunter kit. I have done Snaggas from the normal Savage Ork boys. I've done some Squig Boars from the Savage Ork Boar boys. I've done some Night Goblins, or whatever they're called, Gloomspite Gits into normal grot. I don't think I've shown you them yet. They'll be probably in a video at some point soon. And I've also done another one. Oh yeah, I've done the Storm Boys, didn't I? Which was a very, very cost-effective way to do Storm Boys. Take one box into the shower? No, I take three. Fucking smash them together, and then have lots of wingless nids I don't need. But yeah, I've done a few of them. So anyway, I thought sometimes the boys might not want to walk. They might want a truck. But how am I going to do a truck which fits the theme I've been doing, where they don't even have shoes? You know, they're all barefooted and they're all just wearing like skulls as kegs and stuff like that, running around with animal fur. I was going to say covering their arse. They don't even cover their arse. You can see the bums and everything. So I thought, I'll do a truck that is being pulled by creatures, squigs or boars. In my little head canon, squigs and boars. Well, boars are squigs, but not all squigs are boars. That was something I read in a White Dwarf or a very early, I don't think it was Wild Orcs, might have been Here We Go, but I definitely read it, that boars are a type of squig, and I went, yes, and even if I dreamt it, I'm sticking with it. The blue and everything in my lore. So yeah, it's going to be a truck pulled by a team of 4 boars. That's a powerful truck engine. What power is it? 4 boar power. Yeah, that's all it works. But that's what I'm going to do. In fact, you know, peek behind the curtain here. I've already done it. So we're going to take you through the build, and then at the end, I'll show you a little montage of the fully painted model. So let's get cracking. These are the wheels I wanted to use. I didn't think I could use the truck wheels for a kind of savage wagon because they were a little bit, you know, normal truck tyres with armour plates and studs all over them, whereas these were kind of a little bit more, you know, frontier wagon-esque. So that's why I wanted to use these. These came off 2 mech guns, and by mech gun I mean I think it's called a demon cannon you get from Soul Dark, and they work out about $3 each. I had a few of them knocking about, so I thought, right, yeah, put these to use. These were going to sit on the back end of the truck where the actual truck bed is. But that wasn't really long enough because these wheels, despite being quite thin, are a lot bigger than normal truck wheels. So I had to cut that in half, and I've extended it with a couple of bits of L-shaped plastic rod. For the axles, I did just use the normal truck axles because the actual wheels just fit quite snugly on there without any need of glue. I did glue them in the end, but it's just for, you know, for test fits and what have you. Now the drive shaft, I think it is, which normally runs between the 2 axles, was a little bit short, so I just used a little bit of plastic rod just to act as a new connector. Now there's no reason for this to be there, to be fair. I just kind of stuck it on, and plus it's underneath the model so you won't even see it. Yeah, I've done a little test fit whilst the glue was still wet on the axles, just because I wanted to make sure all 4 wheels touched the floor. Nothing worse than when you get a wonky and it just rocks between 2 of the wheels. So yeah, I want to make sure that wasn't going to happen. Now for the boars, you can see here I got 4 boars from the Savage Orks out of the Age of Sigmar range, and I made little green stuff, not so much capes for them, just sort of blankets for the backs, because I was going to have the main part of the harness resting across them. Now I don't know what the terms are for all this sorts of stuff. It's not a traditional harness where you've got the straps and the bars at the side and all that sort of carry on. I just put a big tube across the back, on top of the green stuff blankets, and then wrapped some chain around that and fed the chain down through the boar's mouths and then back up the other side. The boars are also all pinned onto that bar as well, just for some added extra stability. You can see them from the front. And the bit of white plastic card they're on was a 2mm thick piece, and I was going to use that as a base. Now I know what you're thinking, you don't put trucks on bases, and you're right, you don't. But I thought this is the only way I could think to get this to actually work. But then I thought, you know what, if I just make sure that they're nice and secure, it won't really need a base. So I did do away with that idea in the end. I cut the front of the truck frame off and decided I was going to put something else on connecting the main body of the truck to the harness for the boars. I put the bed of the truck onto the frame just to give it the main base of where the troops are going to stand. Now there's quite a bit of metal on that, so it's probably going to weigh an absolute ton, and then boars are going to have the work cut out pulling this, but you know, quite stubborn creatures is the out Squiggy Boar. They'll manage. You can also see above the two front wheels there's a big gap where the truck bed doesn't cover, so I need something to go there. So I built what is essentially a little tray out of plastic card and put a few scraps of armour plate in the bottom of it, and a wooden footboard as well. That's why that one side is leaning open, that's going to be the footboard where the driver puts his feet. There's a gap at the back because that'll go into the rest of the truck. Now as for the driver, I got another Savage Ork boy. I had a few spare ones knocking about, and I cut his legs off, right at the top, basically through the groin. So I can then stick them back on and rotate them forward slightly, just so he looks like he's sitting down as opposed to standing up. I left the loincloth thing exactly as it was, because what I'll do with that is I'll just have that hanging down the front of his seat. And I also took his feet off, but that was only because I had to extend his legs slightly, just to have him reaching the actual floor. Otherwise, they'd be dangling, and there's nothing less threatening than somebody sitting on the seat with the legs kicking in fresh air. And I know what you might be thinking, could you not have just moved him further forward or lower down so his feet were touching the ground? It didn't look right. It looked like less room than an economy class Ryanair flight or something like that. No leg room at all, so this was the best way. There you can see him in place. I used a couple of coffee stirrers just to make a little bench for him to sit on, and the gap between where his legs and his feet were separated I basically just plugged up with some sprue goo, which is where you put lots of little offcuts of sprue and what have you into an old pot of plastic glue and just let it dissolve into this thick grey paste which sets like plastic. This is a chunky piece of plastic rod in an eye bar. You can see I've tapered off one end of it and drilled a hole through, and I've cut a section out of the other end. This is going to be used to attach the wagon itself to the boar harness. So the tapered off bit was just sort of from sticking out too far underneath the wagon. The hole is just to put a bar through to attach it to the truck, and the little bit snipped out at the other end is to actually fit round the tube I used as the main part of the boar harness. That'll probably make more sense when you see it. I then cut a couple of rings of thick plastic tube. I cut a flat surface on both of them and then stuck those to the fronts of those little prongs there on the truck body. I'm going to use the word truck and wagon interchangeably all the way throughout this video, so hopefully that doesn't get too confusing for anyone. It's definitely confused the hell out of me. I also put another 2 rings of that plastic tube on either side of the hole on the eye bar, and you can see here when those line up there's a bit of plastic rod down here which just slides through and pins them in place. Now that will hold it together, but I will glue this as well just to make sure it's extra specially secure. And although the other end does hold quite tightly to that harness and would probably make transporting the truck a lot easier, because I was going to attach more chains to it, I really needed to be in place all the time. So I had a pin ready just to pin that in place, although I did keep it all separate for painting. So there it is with the pieces put together. You can see it's starting to take shape. It looks like a wagon drawn by boars. You can also see as well that I covered up the sides of that little tray, cabin tray, driver's seat, with a couple of the armour plates and big dags that you got with the Gore Grunter from AoS as well, which I used on a previous build to make a cyborg. Now this is one of the chains I mentioned earlier that I was going to add. I gave the driver his left arm and had him with a fist, which I drilled through, pinned in a kind of fist bump rotation. That meant I could slide this little thin jewellery chain through it, and I was going to have each end of it attached to that big harness bar. And that's supposed to be how he steers them. Now at this point, the tray, which is the driver's seat, is not actually glued to the truck, and to be fair, neither is the truck flatbed at the back. they're both just sort of sitting on top, just as a bit of a test fit. Underneath the actual driver's seat, I'd put a couple of bits of this girdery plastic rod, so the driver's seat will be lifted up and forward, which you can see here. You can also see a big skull on the front of the bow harness. That did not stick around, I ended up using something different. Now here's the truck bed. To build up the sides on this, I cut 6 equal length pieces of square plastic rod, and I also tapered them at the bottom, so when I glued them in place, they would be sticking off at an angle. You can see a lot of white dust all the way around that. That is bicarbonate of soda, which I've used to set the super glue, because once I'd glued them in place, I did put more super glue, quite a medium viscosity super glue, around there, and sprinkled a bit of that on just to get an instant bond, and that just helps secure them a lot more. It also means you've got a bit of texture as well if you want to sort of put a bit of rust or muck or grime or something on. Then those plastic rods give us somewhere to mount more coffee stirrers, just for some planking on the side of the wagon. The little clamps you can see were just used to make sure that they were fully attached to the plastic rod as the glue dried. Now because I'd built up the driver's seat in actual height, I had to build up the truck cab in height as well. So to do that, I got 3 more bits of round plastic rod. I think it was plastic tubing. I actually think it's a lollipops, this one. Not proper hobbycraft plastic tubing, but a big bag of plastic lollipop sticks that cost a couple of quid for about 100. I do prefer using the proper stuff because these don't take the plastic glue great, but these will do for this, and I wrapped some soda around it just to show that they look a bit like springs. I probably overdid it, used more soda than I needed to, and had them too tightly wound, but they're just 3 supports which I'm going to add the truck base to. Now I deliberately had these at different heights, so the truck base isn't level, it's kind of rocking to one side, like it would do if it was bouncing around all over the place. I also took a couple of what looked like massive creatures' jaw bones. There's a couple of teeth left on one of them, with lots of orky dark stuck to it. Again, this came with the Gore Grunter kit. I think these actually hang down the sides of the Gore Grunter as some sort of harness, and they've got platforms on the bottom which a couple of orcs with big choppers stand on just to howk at people as it gallops past. But I never used them in my sideboard build, so instead I used them as a bit of an arch for behind the driver's seat. I did have to chop them up a little bit and fill some gaps with some putty. Not the neatest of work, but most of that's going to get covered up anyway, so I wasn't arsed. I just quite like the look of this. I think it gives it more like a frontier wagon vibe. You know, little house on the prairie and all that. You can also see I've added a pin to his raised right hand. What's he done that for? We'll see. Be patient. I've done it for that. Quicker than I thought. This is the driver's motivational acceleration device, or big gnarly whip. It's actually a chain off the AoS Mangler Squigs kit. I give the driver a Savage Ork hand, which was holding some sort of melee weapon with a bone for a handle, and I cut that off and pinned the chain in place. It's just got quite a nice dynamic feel as if it's flinging around the place, and he's given the boars merry hell to encourage them to go forward at an expedient velocity. Another progress shot with the driver's seat and the truck bed in place. It's always nice to do stuff like this because it's very encouraging as you build it. This is just one of the Savage Ork totem banners. I just snipped off the bits I didn't want and then ran it over a nail file and had a flat side. Once that was done, I could glue it onto this bit of eye bar just to give it a little bit more detail, and you know, so it's not just a plain old girder. I also added some glyph plates to the front of the driver's seat bit, and one of the roll bars from the truck kit just to give it a more complete frame feel. You can also see a big plastic tube stuck to the back of the bones at the front there. What's he done that for? Just be patient, we'll get there. Here you can see the earthly remains of Mickey Mouse or some shit. It is a Halloween decoration which cost £1 from Poundland, or everything's a pound, or Pound Stretcher, World of Pounds. I don't know where it came from. It's been knocking around the garage for a long time. I think it's a Halloween decoration, maybe just a rat died in my garage and I've just had it. Oh, he's smiling too much, must be a decoration. But I thought I'm going to use this because we've got some nice big bones on that, and that'll fit the theme of the Savage Orks, the Snaggas, the feralness, all that sort of carry on. So I cut its spine away and mounted it to the truck. Now the tube, like I mentioned earlier, just happened to slide perfectly into it. So that's why the tube was there, just as a mounting point for the spine. It was then just glued to the bit of framework at the back as well. Now this is an Ork chopper, a savage Ork chopper at that, as you can tell from the flint head and the bone handle. Now the reason it's in two pieces is because I cut the hand away and then I was able to pin it and glue it back together. So I've got a full chopper here. Because although the driver has got his hands full at the minute, what with chain and whip, he's got to have a chopper nearby just for when he has to get stuck in. And this is his. This is a small pouch, which is an accessory from the Savage Ork kit again. It looks like testicles. Let's move on. Now this is the Truck's big shooter. I'd actually knocked this big shooter up a while ago, because I'd done two for my last mega grot tank, although I only actually used one. I was going to do two, one on each side, ended up just putting one on the back. So this is a spare one. All it is just one of the heavy stubbers, I think of the Cargo 8 thingy, and that stuck an Orky shield on it, and also a bit of plastic tube, which was just split down the length and then snipped around the barrel, just to give it a chunkier barrel so it didn't look quite as weedy. And the boy was just another boy from the Savage Ork kit, and I just cut his weapons away and trimmed his arms a little bit at the shoulder so they angled in so they'd be holding the handles on the gun. Now because it's got a big spine running down the centre of it, I couldn't just have that glued to the jawbone and framework, so I tied it in place with quite a lot, to be fair, of dental tape. Just gives it a look of rope or something like that. So a bit at the front, bit at the back, and a little bit in the middle, and then glued a couple of the Savage Ork shields on as well. I've got boatloads of them knocking about. I've never used them before, so I just shaved the hands off the back and then glued them on the side. Just picked ones that had nice skulls on them. You can also see the handle of the chopper there sticking up. I cut a wedge out of the seat next to the driver and just glued it in. So as he sat down, he's got his chopper and just thunked it into the seat, like you see manly men doing with, you know, hatchets and bits of wood and that. I don't need this hatchet no more, I will bed it in the wood to keep its blade keen. Thunk, you know, that kind of crack. You'll probably get a better look at that in a bit. I also had to cut a wedge out of one of the sides of the coffee stirrers just to mount the big shooter. I just drilled a hole into the side of the coffee stirrer, and the pin that was already on the big shooter from Mega Tank days just slid into place. Give us a little bit of play as well as to whereabouts I was going to actually have it aimed, because I could sort of pivot on that point. You can also see little studs on the planking. That is just Vallejo plastic putty. I went around just blop 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 and just dotted those on. It's a lot quicker and smaller as well than using like rivets. Sometimes you don't want them quite as big. He has a couple of the big spears from the Savage Ork kit. In that kit there's a couple of lads, both carry one of these above the heads, and they charge forward and give people good stabs. I don't know any more than that, other than I've already used the arms, so I was never going to build them, and I've got no bodies left for that matter. So I got those spears, and the little holes you can see, little white squares, that's where the hands would normally mount onto. I just filled those in with some more of that plastic putty, and I decided I was going to have these hanging off the side of the wagon, just an easy reach, so if the boys did come up against something that needed a bit more heavier firepower, like, I don't know, a Bane blade, they could break out the slightly larger, wonkier spears and win. Maybe's not. This is one of the lads I'm going to put in the back of the truck. He looks absolutely gasping for a high five, but I'm actually going to use that open hand, which was from a drummer, I believe, just to be holding onto the rail and the framework at the back of the truck, and he's just going to be basically peering out the back. I give him a bow and arrow set up because it just seemed more feral. You can also see underneath the truck I actually made use of the pouch that looks like testicles by doing my very first set ever of truck nuts. They really are savages. And there he is in place. He's just looking at where they've been. I also decided I was going to add a couple of grots from the Mangler Squig kit, just hanging on for dear life. I didn't know where I was going to put them at first, and I had about 4 of them, but in the end I just settled on these 2 sitting on the very top, because any other ones I put on just looked cluttered. Again though, any crew placement is just test fit. I'm just balancing them on. Maybe a bit of blue tack. I'm going to have to paint these separately, so yeah. The positions might alter slightly in the end. Now, because of the gap between the truck bed and the actual driver's seat, I didn't want people falling out, so I put a couple of little safety chains on. Chains seem to be a more sensible idea, as rigid wood would stop the maneuverability of the wagon as it bounced around, whereas chains would have that flexibility. You can also see a little bit of extremely poor green stuff work around the bottom of the bone arch, which is just to sort of cover the ugly gap, and it was just done like animal fur with a couple of straps around holding it in place. You can barely see it on the finished model, so I wasn't that bothered about trying to make it perfect. You can also see that chopper there and where it's embedded into the driver's seat better from this angle. There's a side with the big spear in place, as if by magic, just hovering there. Between the wheels I've added a couple of big sides. I say a couple, there's one on the other side as well. These were the actual platforms I mentioned earlier from the Gorgrunter kit that the orcs actually stand on. I think they're very small to be stood on if you're a massive orc in a full suit of like plate armour. But as for just sitting on the side of a truck and scything people down, or at least banging them in the knee as you go tear-arsing past, I think that's fine. Much better idea. And there's the other side. See? Another side. I tell you, I wasn't lying. And of course you can see the other spear as well. Now on this one, I've actually put the chains on, which hold it in place. Wrapped around the rear frame bit, and also just an extra pin I stuck in. You can also see just about where the chains were between the back bed and the driver's seat. I've put some more green stuff animal fur over there as well. Because although there's a chain there for safety, it doesn't keep the chill out. Not like some animal fur, animal faux fur. Now, because one thing that's kind of gotten me tits since 1987 when I started into Warhammer, first time round anyway, is bows without strings. It actually got on me tits in Dungeons and Dragons as well. That Hank prick running around with a bow with a string, what a doilum. I know I'd like made magic arrows or lightning arrows or some nonsense with a crackly yellow magic string, but it just looks silly. A bent bow and a string, what are you doing? And I understand the limitations of modelling, you know, it would have to be very thin, it would snap and whatever. I decided to give it a string. So that is just a bit of brass rod, drilled a hole into the top of the bow and cut a little notch out at the bottom of the bow, slid the rod in, clipped it into place, boom, bowstring. And there it is, pretty much ready for painting. Minus the crew. I did put a couple of extra things on, just bits and bobs here and there for decoration, and did an extra crew member with this lad, the archer from Headcracker's Mad Mob. All I done with him though was cut him off his rocky base, because the feet were attached to the base, so I had to cut his feet off and replace these raised tactical rock with a tactical skull trophy from some flat two-part skull in the GW skull kit. I also replaced his weedy little arrow with a much bigger arrow, and of course given some copper rod bowstrings. Now the reason I gave him a bigger arrow was because I also added this, which is the winch off the truck's wrecking ball. I wasn't giving it a wrecking ball, but I liked the idea of this being mounted to the side of the truck, where one of the crew can fire off an arrow, a big harpoony type of arrow, with a rope attached to it. That would hit the target, and then you could winch it in with this handle and bring the target to you. A bit like the sticker on the kill rig, albeit a bit smaller in scale. So I had this mounted to the opposite side of the truck to the big shooter. And for the actual rope, I just used more solder wire just to coil it around that middle cylinder there, and then have it sort of like draped down into the truck. And I had more of it tied to the arrow on the archer, which also trailed down to the floor. And then when you put them in place, make the two ends touch, boom, there you go, sorted. So as I said before, it's ready for painting, so I painted it. Painted the boars separately, blue like I do all me squigs and boars and that sort of stuff, and a bit of red on the blankets just because I think it contrasts nicely. Makes them look a little bit like super boars. You know, is it a bird? No, it's a boar. Is it a plane? No, it's a boar. Look, it's a boar. I said that before. You know, that kind of carry on. The metallics, I just painted the usual way, painted them all silver, and then just dirtied them up. And the wood parts, I wanted them to contrast from the metallics, but not too much. I wanted to keep it in the same sort of palette, the same range. But you can tell what's wood and what's metal. Because it looked a little bit grimy, the only thing that was really popping was the bone, I decided to put the usual blue and red dags and accents all over it, and I thought I can really lift the colour up with the crew. But this is no painting video, this is a build video, I hear you cry. This is no painting video, this is a build video. Yeah, I thought I did. So I'm not going to show you that. You know how to paint things, you certainly should know how I paint things by now, and if you don't, just check out some of the previous videos. I've done it all to death, and I'm just repeating myself now, which is no fun for anyone, definitely not yous. And yeah, this is the finished truck. I'm very pleased with it. It's a little carnival of colours. Isn't it pretty? And it is a truck. It's truck size. Well, it's a bit bigger than a truck. I think a normal truck starts about there and goes to about there. So it's only an inch or so on it. But it's definitely a truck. It's got a big shooter. Just the one. That makes it a truck. So it has been compared to a kill rig, which I think is very unfair, because it's not a kill rig. There we go, this is my kill rig. Isn't it lovely? I didn't get very far with it. And as you can see, it's nowhere near a kill rig size. Okay, it's exactly the same size as a kill rig. But that's not the point. It's not a kill rig. It's a truck. That's kill rig size, with the sticker. But there's no thump gun, or you know, the mortar thing, or Warboss tower, so it can't be a kill rig, can it? Dread will have me back with this. He makes massive trucks that he drives to meetups and that. They're so huge, working engines and everything. Yeah, I just went a little bit bigger than normal. That's modelling for disadvantage. No one's got a problem with that. And plus it looks so pretty. You can also see I went with a little helmet there on the front instead of the big skull. It just looked better. So yeah, you've seen it there, kind of moving around and probably out of focus and all sorts of carry on. So you probably want a better look at it. And even if you don't, I want to show you it. Ha ha ha. It's my video. You can't decide. You can stop watching, I suppose. Please don't stop watching. Yeah, I'll finish up with some glamour shots of the truck, and I hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you do, and also if you don't, just hit them anyway. Leave a comment. I tried to reply to all my comments. Comments directed at me, not ones I make. If I was just replying to comments that I'd made, I'd just be talking to myself. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, take care.